Hello, welcome. We're so happy that you're here. We want to let you know that we're recording this event. And if you haven't already, please mute yourself. But please feel free to turn your camera on if you're game. It's a bummer to perform to a screen of black empty rectangles. So we would love to see you all if you're up for it. All right, so thank you so much for joining us today for our annual Candidates Weekend Story Slam. My name is John Adler. I'm a psychology professor here at Olin. Yes, we have psychology at Olin, along with many other great arts, humanities, and social science opportunities. The research that I do focuses on the way we make meaning out of our lives by telling stories about our experiences. And tonight is a night when that is really on display.
And hello, I'm Gillian Epstein, the informal DJ who is now back in my rectangle where I belong. I'm Olin's writing initiative specialist. It's a made-up title I wrote myself because I specialize in that. We are super glad to see you. John and I love inviting prospective Olin students and their families into our storytelling culture here at Olin, where we have an inner life and we're not afraid to show it. So instead of a traditional introduction, I always like to walk my writing specialist walk and introduce things with a story. Usually I ask you if that's okay, but it's hard to tell in your rectangles if it is. So I'm going to hope that you're fine with that, in which case, here goes. So once upon a time, during these 2 pandemic years and counting, I needed an outlet for free time. Or more specifically, I needed to differentiate free time from the mishmash of my 1 a.m. work emails and my kids' ever-changing hybrid school schedules and the bleak irrelevance of weekends versus weekdays. And sure, I had the usual cluster of ambitious free time projects that came and went, making my own sourdough starter. I bought a mason jar, but have yet to start the starter, seasoning my wok, done. And rewriting the parts of my novel that aren't quite working yet, sigh. Anyway, all this stuff is really just a front for what I'm actually up to. You know, the free time thing I've been doing daily since day 1 of the pandemic. The thing that story slam or no story slam, you can bet I'll be doing later today. All right, who are we kidding? I already did do it today. I'm talking about the New York Times spelling bee. And don't let the New York Times part of it fool you. This free time activity isn't edifying or intellectual or keeping me up to date on a single current event. And don't let the spelling bee part of it fool you either. I got bounced out of my 4th grade spelling bee after failing to put the T at the end of parfait. I grew up on the car-filled cake streets of Jersey, not the custard and cream cobblestones of Paris, and I haven't looked back since. Au revoir, 4th grade. No. The New York Times spelling bee is just a game. Each day you get 7 letters arranged in a honeycomb shape. Get it? Honeycomb, spelling bee. Oh, New York Times, how you toy with us. And the more words you make and the more letters they have, the more points you get. And if you use every letter in the honeycomb to make one single word, what the New York Times incorrectly calls a pangram, the game lights up like a pinball machine. Okay, the game never lights up like a pinball machine. It's the New York Times, not a freaking arcade. But you do get 7 extra points for the pangram, which makes my heart go pit-a-pat. Speaking of which, the words I have learned to sniff out like a bloodhound while playing my daily spelling bee are not exactly enhancing my vocabulary. Because yes, my fingers continuously hammer out lame but valuable 7-point words such as pit-a-pat, as in the pit-a-pat of fuzzy little cat feet. And also it's very lame and very valuable 7-point cousin, rat-a-tat, as in a cold wind rat-a-tatting at my window, the rat-a-tat of a rattlesnake's tail. Yikes, is there a rattlesnake at my window? It doesn't matter. Meaning has no meaning in the daily spelling bee. And so here I am, a pandemic year or 2 later, reconnecting with whoever. What have you been up to? Asks whoever. Rat-a-tat, I reply. Okay, I don't, but it's what comes to mind. Maybe because my mind has slowly but surely taken on the shape of a honeycomb. But even if it has, and even if my typing fingers are rat-a-tatting out the sorts of sounds you'd hear chirped by your local toddler, I've decided that's okay. Sure, I could give you edifying intellectual justifications for playing the spelling bee, like how if you stare at the puzzle long enough, you find things you couldn't see before, that your brain makes new patterns, new connections, new pathways, which is a lot like what happens with storytelling when we stare at our lives long enough, which is the connection I was planning to make in this hypothetically edifying introduction. But stories don't usually go according to plan. Mine don't anyway, and neither does free time, and neither does life. It's not like I don't see the pileup of stressful New York Times headlines about the next COVID variant, the next climate disaster, the next election. It's just that before I get back to all that, I need a break for a minute or 10 or however long it takes to find the daily pangram that uses all 7 letters. Because at the end of the day, or yes, the middle or the beginning of the day, the spelling bee gives me permission to play. A way to recharge before I return my attention to challenges that frankly can sometimes feel overwhelming. And in that same spirit, we hope the Story Slam offers all of you a playful way to recharge, giving our fantastic storytellers ways to experiment with how they narrate their experience, and giving you, our audience, a chance to cartwheel through someone else's creative world and take a break from the hubbub of college admissions. And yes, the word hubbub will get you a quick 6 points in the New York Times Spelling Bee. Consider it a party favor.
Wow, thank you, Gillian. So as the psychology professor, Gillian and I decided that it's her job to tell us and then my job to do a little interpretation of it. But that story actually was perfect because it illustrates something fundamental about the role of stories in our lives. So in my field, we think a lot about the role of time in understanding our lives, right? Time flows incessantly without pausing, but our experience of time is much more uneven than that, right? So we've all had the experience of feeling like time is flowing too slowly or that it's rushing by. Well, I like to think of stories as tools for carving out little eddies in the flow of time, little spaces where we get to step out of the current and swirl around for a while before getting plunged back into the stream. So stories are the tool that our species has evolved for breaking up the flow of time into a series of connected, discrete moments. And that is the foundational building block of how we make meaning of our lives. We need to be able to develop an ability to think of our lives in terms of specific moments, not just the blur of time, in order to hold on to our lives and to learn from our experiences. From a developmental perspective, this is actually the first thing that toddlers learn how to do when it comes to storytelling. So if you ask a 3-year-old to tell you a story, it usually goes this, and then this, and then this, and then this. It's all chronology. And as we get older, we get better at drawing connections between experiences and then ultimately between experiences and our developing sense of self. And while we don't think about it consciously very often, the way that we choose to draw these connections and interpret them actually provides the foundation for our mental health. We live in a world of meaning. So yes, objective things happen in our lives, but the infrastructure of our memory system is built around meaning. So the way we translate our lives into stories really matters. In my field, we see again and again that the way people narrate their lives is actually a stronger predictor of their mental health than many of the standard kinds of variables that psychologists often examine, like our demographic variables or our dispositional personality traits. And so, Gillian, your story illustrates the way that you carved out an eddy in the flow of time over these past year or two. And goodness knows the pandemic has made our lives blurrier than anything else I can remember. So it enabled you to sit with these small moments of joy, right? They aren't the moments that tell you what your life means to you, but they serve as demarcations, as moments set apart that give the rest of our lives its texture and its contours. And because you're you, even those little moments of so-called meaninglessness can't help but offer you insight anyway. Well, the stories that our 6 Olin student storytellers have to share with you tonight also do profound meaning-making work. We all tell stories about our lives all the time, but these 6 students have done something that we don't do every day. They have sat with one specific moment or a small collection of moments, and they have swirled around with it long enough to figure out what it really means. Not in some definitive kind of way, but in a way that lends order to the blur of life, that makes things make sense now. So the stories that you're going to hear tonight are a beautiful example of how powerful it is to sit with our life experiences and work at making meaning from them. That work is very much a part of the Olin culture, and it's been an astounding privilege to get to join these students in this project work over the last 6 months or so, and I couldn't be more excited for them to share their stories with you tonight.
Okay, so get ready. Feel free to turn on that camera because our storytellers love to see their audience. It makes this extra fun. And we take you on a wonderful ride. Without further ado, we are proud to bring you Arwen Sadler with A Little Scary.
Over the pandemic, I accidentally started a coven. It was October 2020. We hadn't left the house for 5 months. And don't get me wrong, we didn't want to. But with the weather getting colder, we were getting a little stir crazy. And Halloween was coming. I'd always loved Halloween, not for the candy. I loved the spookiness of it. Putting up the Halloween decorations in and of itself felt like a holiday. And I was always determined to make ours the spookiest house on the block. Halloween was an adventure. You could be something else for a night, and you could walk anywhere without your parents through this amazing, scary world. But this year, the world was too scary. This year, it wouldn't be the chill of the night air, the orange glow of jack-o'-lanterns, or the gaunt faces of ghoulish decorations that made things scary. It'd be the fear of other people's bodies, the threat of closeness, and the miasma of strangers' breath. So instead of Halloween, we celebrated the ancient Celtic holiday Samhain. Samhain, the origin story of Halloween, is halfway between the fall equinox and winter solstice, and is more or less about death, which is where our life-sized plastic skeleton with glowing red eyes came in. The skeleton, of course, was meant to represent the ancestors, any of our dead friends or relatives who might come around tonight, which they could do since the veil was so thin. We snipped the zip ties off holding the skeleton's legs around its skull, set it at the head of the table, and boom, grandma. Grandmas, really, and grandpas and uncles and friends and so on, since the ancestors included everyone we knew that had died. There was a lot to catch up on over dinner. We live in Pennsylvania now. Can't recommend any places to go in Philly because we haven't been able to go to any yet, but still, that's cool. Arwen and Perry are in college. Well, not in college, but you know, taking classes on Zoom, missing out on the concerts and coffee shops and obscure little restaurants and late night study sessions, but in college. Bet you're glad you didn't have to live through a global pandemic, huh? Yeah, no, sorry, that was tone deaf. You're right, I am glad I'm alive at all right now. You know, I really miss arguing at the holidays. Yeah, let's bring that back. I miss the way you two would debate politics in the living room, and I miss the way you'd be friends afterwards and even during, how you'd love us through your disagreements. I miss summers at your place. I miss having a cat who'd hated everyone except me. I miss sitting on the deck, doing homework in the glow of the sunset and your crooked smile. I miss you. And damn it, I miss going outside too. Let me have that, will you? We left our dinner with the ancestors feeling hollow, scooped out like pumpkins. But coming together to not just invite in the darkness, but have a conversation with it, left us with something to keep inside ourselves, to keep us warm. The next morning, we were eager to celebrate something again. The next Celtic holiday was Yule, Xmas, and after that would be Imbolc. And so I'd started a coven. Coven sounds scarier than it actually is, I guess. We don't ride on broomsticks or brew things in bubbling cauldrons. And I promise I won't turn any of you into a newt. But I like the look on people's faces when I tell them I started a coven. It's fun to be a little scary. I've learned that fear is something you can invite in. Make it something you can sit with. Look into its glowing red eyes and smile as you wrap a scarf around its neck and pour it a drink.
Oh, thank you, Arwen. Please feel free to put your reactions in the chat since we can't actually all be in one room together. But that was wonderful. So thank you so much. Okay, so our next storyteller is Blake Blansett, and the story is called Mouse on a Mission.
Ow, ow, ow. I did not sign up for this. I did not sign up for Blake digging his paws into my sides as he gallivanted me into the Norden Auditorium. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to sneak into Milas Hall stealthily without a human's helping hand. Let me tell you a little secret. I am the Olin Student Body Guardian Angel, Mouse Edition. If you're wondering why Blake's behavior warrants my visit, well, let's just say that Blake has an alarming dependency on sugar-free Red Bull, and it's only intensified as the fall musical Mamma Mia approaches. He must be stopped, which is why I'm ears up, tail steady, and ready to render the Milas Hall vending machines out of order. But now, Blake has unknowingly meddled with my plans. While he helped me breach the barrier between me and my target, the entire cast and crew of Mamma Mia are now painfully aware that I am staked out behind the vending machines, chomping away at the wires. And let's just say some of them are not too pleased. Normally, living mice don't stay living very long in Milas Hall, and the directors have made it known very loudly that this was the case. If only they could hear my thoughts on their decision to put on this absurd travesty of a musical, that would muzzle them. Let's just say it's not quite Sondheim. Blake's mistake shouldn't exactly come as a surprise. He's kind of all over the place, averaging 12 hours a day in bed, showing up late to all his classes, and spending more hours on Twitter than with his friends. I probably shouldn't say this, but the guy runs a Twitter account for corn. Yes, corn is in the vegetable. And don't get me started on the wolf tattoo he's designing but will never get. I would rather go diurnal than get that creature inked into my skin. If I'm being honest, Blake has burrowed himself into an extensive pile of mistakes due to an extensive amount of difficult circumstances, self-medicated by an extensive number of things. It was my job to help him find his way out. Concurrently, I was doing just that. After examining the thickness of the vending machine wires I would be gnawing through, I calculated that this task would take a few days, and I realized that I required more sustenance. Fortunately, Blake took care of me, proof that he was capable of much more than destruction. During his next vending machine purchase, he also purchased some trail mix. He sorted out the dried fruit and dropped a handful next to the machine. I graciously accepted it, and in response, he gifted me with more. This routine continued, Blake drinking poisonous liquid energy and me feasting upon vending machine wires and dropped fruit. On the third day of these charades, I heard Blake curse loudly. Honestly, that's pretty standard Blake behavior, but this one was delivered with more ferocity than usual. He proceeded to exclaim that completely out of Red Bull, rendering my work no longer necessary. John, where was I?
You're right at
Wondering my
completely
way.
out of Red Bull. Just take it from Red Bull, Blake
Okay.
and Mouse.
He proceeded to exclaim that the vending machines were completely out of Red Bulls, rendering my work no longer necessary and my quest canceled. With my mission complete, I darted out, ready to return home. I surrendered this job the same day Blake surrendered his sugar-free Red Bull addiction, but only because the vending machine was empty. It took a lot longer for him to stop sauntering by the machines, knowing there was an off chance his stimulant of choice would be restocked. It took a lot longer for him to acknowledge his maladaptive coping mechanisms were manifestations of the real problems he was facing, problems that needed some professional attention. Woodland creatures can only do so much. For Blake, it was a bittersweet goodbye, me leaving his hands and the caffeine leaving his veins. I may even venture to say that he loved me more than the taste of taurine and aspartame. But despite this love, it was time for me to scurry away. I check in on him every once in a while, and he's doing well. He hasn't exactly solved his chaos, but he has learned to wield it more appropriately. But as for me, I have other Oliners to attend to now. Don't worry, my services are confidential, except for the occasional story slam, of course. But rest assured, Blake signed a waiver.
Thank you, Blake. I think the guardian mouse might have wanted to get a word in on that microphone, but luckily you wrested it back from its little paws. That was fantastic. Feel free to applaud for our fabulous Blake in the chat and our fabulous mouse. Next, we have Declan Freeman Gleason with Stopping in the Middle.
There's a stand of big leaf maple and alder about 20 minutes from the house I grew up in. It's surrounded by taller Douglas fir and cedar that suddenly fade into the deciduous trees. If you go there in late September, the leaves will have started to fall over the grass that's still dry from the August heat. And when it rains, the water brings everything back to life a little so that the wild rose and blackberries and dry leaves let out a wonderful sweet smell. When I was 14, I ran a race through there. It was September and the smell hit me the second I entered that part of the woods. It smelled like childhood, but it made this weight in my stomach drop. I had this feeling that the smell and the forest and the moment were something that at some point I wasn't going to be able to get back. It was a preemptive feeling of loss that manifested itself as a sudden sick to my stomach wall of anxiety. It really unsettled me. I don't think I understood how to deal with that emotion at the time, so I stopped running. I let the other people in the race pass me, and I just looked up at the trees and stared at the gray sky. And I stopped what felt like a long time, but it was probably only 15 seconds. Then I re-entered the flow of the race. I didn't think about that race for a long time. It kind of seemed like a far off moment that was just me being weird and angsty and 14. It was really only until this last summer that something took me back. It was mid-July, and there was this brilliantly warm and sunny day where I woke up at 1 p.m. and sat inside the whole afternoon and did nothing. I felt so restless and so stuck in the middle of things. I was stuck between days when I'd hang out with friends and stuck between school years and stuck between different stages of my life. I think I tried to do some work that day, but I felt too restless to get much done. And as it got later, I felt too restless to sleep. Eventually, I went and laid down on the bed in my brother's empty room, and I stared at my phone and scrolled in the dark. My brother's bed had probably been made for months. Even my room was weirdly clean and empty. It was right before 2 a.m. that a friend called me out of the blue. He told me to come see him, and I drove over too fast. There were almost no cars on the roads, and all the lights inside of his house were off or dim, and nobody but us was around. It felt like all the furniture had been moved since I was last there. My friend had just graduated high school and was wondering aloud about college. How do you meet people? How hard will the work be? And I gave my best effort. Everyone wanted to meet people when I started school, and you'll do well with the work. You're smart, but I actually felt weird giving my friend advice about college because I barely knew what going back to school would be like for me. Things were reopening, and maybe things would feel totally normal, maybe not. Eventually, I said, I don't know how college will be for either of us. And my friend answered, but at least you kind of know where you're going. And that made me feel a little bit better. When I drove home, the stars were out and the roads were empty. And I remember reaching the base of a long hill about halfway back to my house and seeing a couple of dry leaves pushed to the side of the road. They reminded me of the race. They reminded me that I would leave soon and that fall would come and go without me. So I stopped the car in the middle of the road and I listened to the warm engine click as it cooled. The air smelled like dry fir needles and dust. I had half the summer stuck in front of me and I couldn't make it go any faster or slower. And my room was too empty and too clean. But no, I was stuck and it was weird. But at that moment, it wasn't about being stuck. I stopped. I chose to stop for a moment. And I chose to make the night mine and to make the stuckness mine.
Oh, thank you, Declan. That was wonderful. All right, our next story comes from Milo Whiston, and the story is called All Grown Up.
Hi. A year and a half ago, when I started to live off campus for the year, I officially became an adult. Adulthood usually takes a long time with lots of failures and triumphs and learning experiences, but this was kind of a rush order. See, Olin doesn't usually let us live off campus since kind of the whole point of this place is the community, but there were extenuating circumstances in the 2020 to 2021 academic year. So I was faced with two options: do the adult thing on my own or stay a child at home, since a certain virus that shall remain nameless prevented me from choosing the safe middle ground of college dorms. And living at home wasn't super appealing. I really didn't feel like sharing a bathroom with my 17-year-old brother. So I did it. I leased an apartment in Boston with 9 other Oliners for an entire year. Like an adult. Oh boy. Preparations for finding and filling an unfurnished home in the middle of a global pandemic went about as smoothly as you'd think. But suffice it to say, approximately 4 realtors later, we all signed the lease and were absolutely raring to fly from our respective nests. Because 7 unexpected months of settling back into the nest you lived in when you were still a hatchling takes a toll, and it's good to get away from that. Any self-respecting bird would feel at least a little bit suffocated in that ever-increasing pile of its own downy feathers and collections of detritus and half-empty water bottles and cups it never took back to the kitchen, even though really, Milo, it's only 10 feet away. You can walk the 10 feet, I know you can. Well, yes, I can, but somehow it just felt easier to go the 1,200 miles in one fell swoop, instead of the 10 feet to my parents' kitchen, back and forth, over and over for the rest of my conceivable life, or until my house ran out of cups. It was time for me to spread my wings, roll up my sleeves, and craft a nest of my own. Don't waste your time trying to picture how a bird rolls up its sleeves. I've been down that road already. Basically, the sleeves are made of feathers and they fold back like I'm in an episode of Tom and Jerry, and that's all you need to worry about. Instead of picturing that, picture this. I, a bona fide adult, bought furniture for my entire apartment. And I did it all by myself. Okay, so I may have needed to call my grandma when I was in the mattress store so she could make certain I wasn't getting scammed. I was. And my grandpa did take a bit of time out of his day to look through the lease before I signed it and make sure my friends and I weren't getting screwed. We were. And my family has essentially been paying for my tuition and my rent and my Venmo balance and my credit card bill and my phone bill and my auto insurance. But self-sufficiency isn't just monetary. And if I can't rely on my grandma's shopping expertise or my grandpa's rusted but still intact realty knowledge, what can I rely on in this world? So yeah, I'm a house furnishing legend, but browsing Facebook Marketplace as it happens does not adulthood make. I mean, I still struggled to perform this wild day-to-day juggling act of online school and online friends and online work. And I developed an impulsive online shopping habit. And all of those things don't feel very adult to me. I mean, I'm sure you guys have the adult thing down. You pay your electricity bill and you don't have to wait for an email from your landlord or a Venmo request from your roommate.
Leave the
You do your...
audio.
Sorry? Did
Yeah.
something happen?
Nope, keep going.
Okay. Something happened. You do your taxes. You know how to do your taxes. You do know how to do your taxes, right? Can I talk to you after this? You do your work and you get it done when you're supposed to. You have a car, probably, and can drive it, and you keep up with your paperwork and your registration and insurance and all that. And you don't have to rent a house. You own your own place and you have a mortgage and you know how to spell mortgage. Morgt. There's a T somewhere, whatever. Point is, I had more responsibilities than I'd ever had before. I learned that being an adult sometimes means being a provider, especially if you live with 9 other people. People would sometimes rely on me for things. If I told them I was cooking dinner for everyone, I'd better have a plan to cook dinner. I didn't have my dad or my dining hall to cover my ass if I didn't. It was just me. So maybe I'd forget and I'd order a pizza instead. And maybe I'd also forget to let my phone receive new calls, and the delivery driver would forget what a doorbell was. So by the time our consolation prize meal arrived, maybe it was cold and soggy and sad and symbolic of my failure to be a person, and maybe I cried a little. Or a lot. Every time I let down the people in my home, I felt like a kid again. And I can't help but think that maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Like maybe in these, my formative years of personhood, something has gone horribly, inescapably wrong. Like maybe I'll be a kid forever. Fall of 2021, my very first day back on campus, I officially stopped being an adult the second I took a seat in the dining hall and ate a meal that someone else cooked for me. Let me tell you, there is nothing that feeling like a grown-up can do that beats being taken care of by other people. When I lived in that apartment, I went through so many triumphs and failures and learning experiences. But as I ate my cheesy scrambled eggs and French toast sticks cooked to perfection, I let myself be swaddled in the loving arms of the Olin College dining hall and feel a little less grown up, just for a moment. Being a kid is over. Being an adult will come with time. But for now, in my final year of college, I think I'll just be.
Well, thank you, Milo. Arwen, I think your coven might be haunting our Zoom microphone, but that's okay. It makes it extra exciting. That's what happens when you summon the ancestors potentially. That was wonderful. Next, we have Jacob Smilg with comfort food.
We walk in and sit in a booth with a mostly non-sticky table next to a window. Some menus are brought to the table. I order water, my parents order unsweetened iced tea, and my dad enthusiastically teaches me about all of the various hash brown styles you can get. You can order them scattered, covered, smothered, whatever. There's a bunch of words that represent various toppings. I end up just ordering waffles. Deciding between two things is hard enough for me. I'm not even gonna try with more. Also, the place is called Waffle House. You have to get the waffles at least once, right? My dad gets a patty melt and my mom gets eggs, both with some form of hash browns. The quality of the food is about what you could expect from a perpetually open chain restaurant. Not bad, but not great either. At least it's hot. There are a few other people eating, but I don't really pay attention to them. Instead, I notice the digital sign in front of the motel outside the window, displaying the time, temperature, and an American flag. I'm reminded of a presentation I saw on YouTube about hacking similar signs, and jokingly say I'll walk back at 2 a.m. sometime and hack it. I met with a serious, absolutely not, there aren't any sidewalks, it's too dangerous, etc., from my mom, which was fair, and a chuckle from my dad. He and I start brainstorming what we'd put on the sign if we got control of it. We could definitely come up with better or at least more entertaining ideas than whoever runs the Mason Inn, right? Maybe just some messages like, cheaper than the Marriott across the street, probably no bed bugs, or come see our pet rat. I have a much easier time entertaining options for imaginary situations than I do for real ones. Conversation winds down as we finish our food and we go back home. My second visit to Waffle House happens about a year later, around 2 a.m. on a school night. I wade into the dark parking lot after a treacherous walk from my house, and unfortunately, I'm not there to hack the hotel's sign. I've given up trying to go to sleep, and also in general. I walk through the door by myself and realize I'm not hungry. I automatically sit down at a booth across from where I sat last time anyway and take in my surroundings. There are a couple of guys at the opposite side of the restaurant talking and laughing. It isn't a large space, so it probably wouldn't be hard to eavesdrop a little, but I can't find the energy. Aside from them, the whole place is quiet and empty, other than the employees and the background noise of the kitchen appliances. I stare off into space for a few seconds until a waitress comes over to take my order. I guess I shouldn't walk into a restaurant and expect to not be served. That's sort of the point of restaurants. She seems kind and is probably the appropriate amount of concern about the miserable looking teenager walking into Waffle House alone in the middle of the night. Still incapable of decision making, I order the default non-water soft drink. She brings me my Sprite, places it on the table, and asks if I'm okay. I lie and say that I am, and don't say that it feels like someone scooped out my brain and tossed some Beyblades in there, which is actually way less cool than it might sound. She gives me a look that says, I don't believe you, but I hope you're okay soon, and leaves me to my lemon lime flavored numbness. I take a sip of my drink. It tastes like Sprite. I try not to think about the medication-induced nightmares I've tried and failed to describe to my parents. I take another sip and realize that a dark purple hoodie and black sweatpants might not be a very safe choice of wardrobe for a 2 a.m. trek along a busy road without a sidewalk. I take another sip and realize that doesn't bother me as much as it should. Eventually, my thoughts slow down as I finish my drink. I get up, pay my 75-ish cents, and begin my walk home in the dark. I don't feel any better, but at least I'm tired now. A year and a half goes by, and I enter Waffle House for the third time with one of my best friends. She broke up with her boyfriend the previous day, and I was elected the designated distractor. The general plan is to spend the day hanging out, and I have to do the driving and pick where we go and what we do. Neither of us are good at choosing things, but I think it's fair to make me do the choosing today, given the circumstances. We agreed on Waffle House for lunch, so here we are. She and I sit down at a booth, incidentally, right next to the one where I sat last time, but that could have been another world at this point. We begin the usually mind-numbingly awful process of deciding what to get and how to work things out, but indecisiveness doesn't feel so bad when you're sharing it with someone else.
Ooh, thank you, Jacob. That was really great. Okay, believe it or not, we have arrived at our very final story for the night. So last, but certainly not least, we have Luke Ross with Fine.
Have you ever felt like your head was going to explode? Not emotionally, I mean like physically. A few years ago, I was pretty convinced that I was going to die on the way down from 30,000 feet. It was winter break, and I had just spent a week or so at my grandparents' home in small town Pennsylvania. It was a cozy, no frills pause with no significant plans. We bought groceries, did the dishes, shoveled the walkway, and yielded the TV to Grandpa for his late night local news ritual. We wanted to coexist with my grandparents, not make them go out of their way to host us. So we did our part to take care of ourselves. That spirit of hearty self-sufficiency was a value my parents had instilled in my brother and I from the start. Mom likes to call it being low maintenance. It was time to head back home to sunny Los Angeles, and our trip had been a pretty routine flight so far. So as the seatbelt light came on for our final descent into Phoenix for a brief layover, my tray table came up and I passed my little plastic Sprite cup to the flight attendant, doing a final trash sweep, and then a twang. A random spark of pain which seemed to emanate from the center of my skull and bounced against the wall. A mild sear at first. I ignore it for a few seconds until it becomes obvious that something's up. Ow, I say to my mom, gripping my temple. She asks what's up, and I struggle to put into words what is a wholly new sensation for me. My brain is on fire. I've got lightning in my skull. Maybe there's a thumbtack bouncing around in there. Mom's as confused as I am, and as the seconds pass in our bewilderment, the pain only grows worse and worse. Eventually, it's damn near debilitating, and I'm clutching my head, and I'm trying really hard to breathe normally, and my mom fetches a flight attendant, and I feel like I'm dying. And oh my God, I have meningitis, or I'm having an aneurysm, or I've got a brain parasite that's finally catching up with me. And my mom is scared shitless, so she's clutching my wrist with an iron grip, which is definitely not helping my stress. And my heart is pumping, and my head is burning, and holy shit, I'm gonna die. I don't wanna die. The plane finally lands a few minutes later. My head is still gonna explode, and the flight attendant has already arranged for the airport paramedics to rush me off the plane. So as we pull into our gate and the door unseals, everyone else is told to remain seated as they come grab an otherwise healthy, able-bodied 16-year-old and shepherd him down the aisle. And at this point, I'm not in quite enough pain to not be acutely aware of how I'm being the exact opposite of low maintenance, but I'm also maybe in the process of dying, so maybe I don't care. The pain slowly begins to subside once I'm off the plane, but I'm sent to the hospital just in case. I'm in an ambulance driving across the tarmac, and then I'm in a hospital bed, then I'm in a CAT scanner, and then I'm just sitting there, almost certainly not in the process of dying. Eventually, the doctor comes out and tells me it was pretty much nothing, that I have something resembling a cyst in my sinuses. Gross, right? Which maybe prevented my head from adjusting to the pressure change. My mom jokes that it could just be some kind of buildup of particulate gunk from my grandparents' 50-year-old carpets. Who knows? And that really there's nothing they can do. And that I'm fine. I'll be fine. as the final bits of paperwork get finished, I can't help but feel a little embarrassed about having been the guy who got rushed off the plane and across the tarmac to spend the afternoon in the hospital for essentially nothing, but also grateful that I didn't need to spend the afternoon there, or God forbid, much longer than that. But wouldn't it have also been nice to actually get treated, patched up, and sent off, good as new, ready for whatever life would throw at me next? But I wasn't. And I still need to get back home to LA, which means I have to get back on a plane. I glance around as we get ready for takeoff. Some of my fellow passengers twiddle with their tray table knobs. Others tightly shut their eyes and sink deep into their headrests, trying, mostly unsuccessfully, to make themselves blissfully ignorant of the inescapable reality that we're about to lurch away from the warm, solid earth and go hurtling through the cold unknown above. So the best we can do is tell ourselves, everything will be fine. Nothing will go wrong. We'll all be fine. Right?
Wow, thank you, Luke. What a fantastic end to a wonderful set of stories. Thank you to our truly amazing storytellers for writing and performing these wonderful pieces. And thanks to all of you for being such a great audience. We love hearing your reaction in the chat and having you cheer our storytellers on. And we can't wait to hear your stories someday. Everyone can do this. Everyone can tell stories, and we love to help make that happen.
Yes, indeed. We're so grateful that you joined us tonight. We're wishing you a wonderful rest of your time exploring and engaging with Olin. And as Gillian said, we hope to have many of you telling stories with us next year. Have a good night. Have a good night.
Bye, thanks for coming.
What a beautiful face I have found in this place that
Airplane
is
here.
circling all around the
Subtle.
sun. What a beautiful dream that could flash on the screen in a blink of an eye and be gone from me. Soft and sweet, let me hold it close and keep it here.
Thank you to all the storytellers for sharing.
Thanks for coming. We're glad you were here.
And one day we will die and our ashes will fly from the aeroplane over the sea. But for now we are young.
We get it, Joe. We get it. It's brilliant.
And count every beautiful thing we can see. Love to be in the arms of all I'm keeping here with me. What a curious life we have found here tonight. There is music that sounds from the street. There are lights in the clouds and there's ghosts all around. Hear a voice as it's rolling and ringing through me. Soft and sweet, how the notes all bend and reach above the tree. Now how I remember you, how I would push my fingers through your mouth to make those muscles move, made your voice so smooth and sweet. But now we keep where we don't know, all secrets sleep in winter clothes with the one you loved so long ago. Now we don't even know his name.
All right, we're clear.
That was great, everyone. That was